All right, you ready? Hey, Carrie.
Hey, Josh.
I mean, hi, Carrie. I'm
Yeah.
supposed to say hi, Carrie.
You are. Hi, Josh.
Yeah. So I was going to mention something to you that I saved for this so that we didn't have the preliminary dialogue about this. And anybody that's listening to this or watching this, you can just go down to the chapters and you can skip right over this into the part that you came to listen to if you want to. But so I go back and listen to these podcasts. Actually, when we after we get done recording it, I go back and I watch them so I know where to put the chapters.
Right.
So I can chapter it out. Then I go back after it comes out on the audio and listen to it, and it actually will give me some ideas for other podcast things that we talk about, but also trying to figure out how to make sure it sounds good and how to make it better. And one thing I noticed, this last one we did with Rebel, when we did on eating disorders, I noticed like that we are doing the nice thing, when we talk, and then we give people a chance to respond and things. And when I was listening to it, I realized it was like there was just like some awkward silences, and it got me thinking about. I was like, that's why journalists are so abrasive when they interview you. So do you remember back when we first started, I'd do a lot of the TV interviews with the News Channel 4 and Linda Kavanaugh, who's for people who don't know, she was a big media figure for years in Oklahoma. And I went to interview with her on a segment she was doing at the station on site, and she's sitting like way closer to me than you're sitting. And then right after, when she asked a question, of course she's like super loud, like louder than what you would normally talk. And then she right after I answer it, she's like asking me another one, like immediately, and I'm like, oh, like caught me off guard, calm down, like give me a second. But I think I know why now, because they can't risk having that, dead air or
dead
awkward
quiet
silences, like we're just being kind, letting, giving someone else a chance to speak. So I feel like I all that to say,
Okay.
I feel like I now have given myself permission to be to interrupt.
You
And
needed the
be
permission?
a little abrasive. Yeah.
Okay.
What? Yeah. I just want to talk. I'm just going to do it.
Okay.
Because
Do I need to be here for this, or I guess so you can interrupt is why I need to be here.
It was in that episode too where I forgot to mention you in the opening.
Oh.
I was like, "Welcome to my podcast."
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Carrie, you're here.
Yeah. The person here for me to interrupt is Carrie.
Yeah. Let me say this too. One more thing. I also noticed that sometimes you do drop a line in there, and I didn't even hear it. I was just too busy in my own world. I'm like, man. I was like, I definitely would have responded to that.
Yeah, but I think that happens in our not filmed dynamic as well.
Nah.
You wouldn't know because you're off to the races on whatever the next thought is.
I don't believe that one.
I know you don't.
It only happens here.
Okay,
What?
sure.
Did you say something just now?
I'm trying not to let any dead space happen.
Yeah, don't let any dead space.
Now I've got to be mindful of that.
Okay, yeah. Well, are we ready to get into this?
We can actually do something of value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's try.
Let's talk about something other people want to hear.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Right. And so, all right. Well, welcome everybody to the Therapist Take podcast. We're going to talk about this idea of rule collapse and governing rules. And then, as you see in the title, it's stop shoulding all over yourself. And so we're going to get into that and explain exactly what we're meaning by that. So don't go anywhere. Was that intro a little loud? Sorry. I saw Hannah, our producer, cringe when that came through. So if we just like blew your ears out, we're sorry. One more thing we can work at changing.
Yeah, I guess.
Are we loud? We're good? Okay. If we're too loud, just comment and let us know. We'll turn the volume down. Okay, so we are going to talk about this idea of shoulding all over yourself and others at times. And before we get into that, just again, just always reminding everybody to check out the show notes. We're going to put links to the things that we talk about there. Go check us out on YouTube if you're not there already. Like us, subscribe, all the nuts and bolts and things like that. So, is there anything else I left out?
I think that's it.
Okay. You were probably telling everybody, and I wasn't listening.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, so when the first thing I was going to ask you, Carrie, was like, because we're talking about this idea of when the reason why we talk about shoulds, should have, supposed to, things like these are governing rules, right?
Yep.
So I was just curious as I was kind of thinking about this show today. Are there any are there any words that you just don't say? Like you make a point not to use them, at least, or you minimize your use of them?
There's certain maybe objectively mean names that I choose not to use on principle.
Okay.
And also self-preservation, because them's fighting words, right? As we would say.
I stopped name calling back in the 80s.
Well, I'm not saying it never happens. I'm saying there's certain words that to me feel you just don't touch those words, right? We could have another episode on that. But I really try hard not to use the word you very much.
Okay.
As a couples therapist, knowing how triggering the word you can be, and it with others, right?
Give me a context.
So instead of saying you should have cleaned your room to my kids, right? Yeah. I thought the expectation was that your room would be cleaned.
Ooh, I like it.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
no,
again, just that immediate first response that almost all humans have around you.
Yeah. I think same thing with the word why. Right? Why tends to put people on the defensive.
Remember in grad school?
Of course.
Where
do you think this trauma comes from?
Exactly. I know. We would get in big trouble if we used the word why in therapy when we were in training.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's stuck. I rarely will use it. I do at times, but usually it's strategic. Sometimes I'll just go, why?
Sure.
Like in a kind of devil's advocate type of way.
Sure.
But when I do that, it's actually to kind of get people thinking about what we're talking about today. Why should I have to do something or not do something? And but for me, it's these words that I definitely pay a really close attention to, not just in my professional life, but in my personal life, to be careful about how I use them. So yeah, we're going to talk about that today. Should have, supposed to. These are like the big ones. So we'll go ahead and put the screen up to kind of show you guys, just kind of give you a heads up on what we are going to talk about, give you an outline of the show here. The first thing we're going to do is talk about what are governing rules. I mean, let's kind of give people a little bit of context what we mean, which we kind of did that a little bit. We're going to talk about when the rules fail, what that looks like and how that feels. Then we're going to talk about changing the rules. And then the last thing is polishing the edges. So this is progressive, right?
Yeah, a process.
Right. At the very end, we're going to go over just a few books that we have linked in the description. If you're watching this on Facebook, you can just check out the. I guess it would also, I guess it'd be above the video on Facebook. So, but we have those linked for you, and we'll talk just a little bit about those, because those books are books that we selected because they represent in some way rule collapse or rule failure. So
okay, yeah.
All right, so let's just start with governing rules. Like, what comes to your mind when you hear or when you think of the governing rules of life or the governing rules of relationship?
Yeah, so I mean, immediately I think of laws, I think of expectations, right? Things that are written and clear about what's okay, what's not okay, what's permissible, what's not. But then, of course, since we're social science people, a lot of the implied or inferred rules that are okay or not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's and I like that better, saying like it's okay or not okay, better than saying you should do this or you're supposed to do this. But I think uh, I think all of us probably launch from our families with some version or some level of should haves and
Of
supposed to.
course, yeah. It's culture. It's microcultural. But it's also larger than that, right? You can't. I don't think you can not learn that.
Right. Yeah.
Double
Well,
negative
I
there.
also I just don't think that it's really all that it's really not on people's radars until they've experienced
Right.
rule failure
Right.
or a collapse of
Sure.
a system collapse. So why would I want to rethink that
Right.
if it's working?
Yep.
Basically.
You don't. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. And so but for me, like this is something that really I've kind of polished, I guess would be the word, over the years and working with people and also just, going through my own personal experiences, but that there's seems to be a collapse of the rules, and so that gets you really thinking about the rules. And one thing I really pay attention to, what I call buzzwords in therapy. Do you have any of those, by the way?
I'm sure.
Yeah. So for me, it's if I have a client that says, I should, this, or that's just not the way it's supposed to be. When I catch those words being said or some variation of them, most of the time, not always, because sometimes it happens at the very end of therapy. I call them out I address it in some variety of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen you do that outside of therapy too. And
Really?
you hear that from people. Supposed to.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of my worldview in general.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's there are things that we do in therapy, or some ways that we talk in therapy, or different kinds avenues of questions that we just don't do in our personal life. It's not an everyday thing for us in that sense. But this is one thing that I would say that it's also something. It's a way that what word am I looking for? Like, it's how I see the world.
See the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to leave too much dead air.
That's
here.
right. Hurry. Fill it.
I want to interrupt you. You just jump in there, Carrie, if you want to say something.
Got it.
So that's kind of just establishing a baseline when we're talking about the governing rules. And the one thing that I will often talk to clients about, I even give it for homework sometimes, is that see if you can catch yourself using the words should have or supposed to, and then take a moment to reflect on that. That is you reflecting on some value or principle or rule that helps you that governs your life.
Right. Right. Well, and I'm thinking too that we often do an intervention with our clients where they actually, part of the work is to write a list of the rules that were in the family they grew up in, right? And those rules,
Yeah, that's right.
right? We have them, and some people can come up with some ideas very quickly, right? But what's interesting after doing this for a while now is that most of the rules that people will write down were not explicit rules, meaning they were not said, right? Like my grandma had a sign in her kitchen that said children should be seen and not heard, which was always hilarious to me because she had 5 kids and they were rowdy as all get out. So it's not usually those explicit rules, but it's usually the rules that you picked up on, like, you can't talk back to dad, or right, those things.
Yeah, that rule you just said, that kids should be seen, not heard, has the word should in it. It can also, by the way, like, you can also say that kids are to be seen, not heard, which again, are to be is another way of saying should.
Right.
But that's actually one of those rules that sometimes gets said out loud.
Yeah, it
and
does.
sometimes it doesn't, but it's still implied. And but that's a really good example of why shouldn't they be? And we're going to get into that in just a minute. But because I think what happens, so we're going to kind of move into this next point of why are we talking about this? Because for a lot of people, you, sometimes it takes a couple decades or more for it to happen. The rules just don't work anymore. And the way I say it often is like the thing that wasn't ever supposed to happen happened. And of course, in our world and working in betrayal trauma treatment, that's often in the form of infidelity.
Sure.
And how many times have we heard one of our clients say, I just never thought that this person would do that to me.
Right. Yeah.
Or would do that in general.
Pretty much every time.
Yeah. Or there's some version, some kind of or variation of there'll be something in there that they just thought would never happen.
Right. I could expect this, but not that. Yeah.
And it's kind of odd to think about, like, like who goes into a committed relationship, thinking that it could happen. I mean,
yeah, you can't actually.
It's definitely more difficult to think of it. I mean, it's not very romantic.
Let's just say that. It kills the romance. Yes.
It's a romance killer.
Right.
But I do kind of think that, I do think there's a way to do that, and that is realistic, and, but I don't think there's a way to do it that there are some things that you just have to experience. And I'm not talking about infidelity here. I'm not talking about that there wasn't another way. What I'm meaning is that you can't prepare somebody enough for the system failure. You know what I mean? We did all this premarital counseling training.
We did.
We used to do a lot of premarital counseling. It's not like we don't do it because we don't want to, or because we don't see value in it. It's just because we're doing a lot of other stuff that happens, that, like betrayal trauma treatment, that in my opinion, there's no amount of premarital counseling that can prepare people for this.
Yes, I agree.
In my opinion.
Right. I mean, it can maybe help, but it's not going to be, it's not like your prepared kit is all packed and you've got everything you need.
Right.
You can't.
I agree.
Right.
But let's just take infidelity off the table.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that can make the system collapse.
Absolutely.
or
Sure.
create rule failure in a sense. It could be, one of the worst ones in my opinion is losing a child.
Sure.
But it can be like an overt loss of losing a child, can be more covert, like ambiguous loss,
Right.
like through like a miscarriage of losing a child. That can do it.
Yep.
It can be losing a job, a career, or some kind of disaster has happened.
Sure.
Or, I mean, it's so many. It could just be realizing someday you're going to die. That can be enough, which we often would call a midlife crisis. Which to me, that's what a midlife crisis is a point in time when the world just doesn't make sense anymore.
The rules are changing.
Yeah.
Because the goals change too. Yeah.
Right. So people listening to this, I don't want them to think that, that you can't, quote unquote, affair-proof your relationship,
Right.
and that, you would just have to experience that and just go through it, and there was no other way like that. I don't believe that for a second. The relationships that we work with where people have had affairs, I think a lot of times that happens as a way to break out of a system that's not working anymore, but I don't think it was the only way that could have happened.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so.
I think so too.
Right. So that's so they experience this rule collapse, or this rule failure, and now this is what we call the liminal state. So do you go ahead, and I feel like I've just rambled on too much. I'm just talking away.
Yeah, well, it's your podcast, right, Josh?
Hey, my guest, Carrie Kiger.
I know, exactly. No, but the liminal state, right, is the idea that you're in between. You're not tethered to one place or another. You are neither this nor that. experience a transition, right? And human beings typically don't do well in transition, even if it's a good transition, right? Transitioning to college or the job you've wanted, right? Or the relationship that you've wanted. But transition is a time of vulnerability. It can be an exciting and pleasurable time, but it also is an anxiety provoking time because you're not yet where you're going to be, but you're no longer where you used to be.
Right. Yeah.
The rules somewhat even are maybe getting written during that time, right?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of see, like, the way I see it is like when we launch from our families, we're kind of, it kind of feels like we're in control, but I think a lot of times it's more like playing Mad Libs with our parents' rules, with their way of doing things. And so they set us out into this world, and they've given us a manual and it's pretty much got it laid out for us in a sense. And, but there's a bunch of blanks and we get to fill in the blanks. But when the system collapses, when that just doesn't work anymore, it's just blank pages. Like there's not even a table of contents. And I'm sitting here holding a pen and I'm supposed to be writing my story and I don't even know where to begin because it's just nothing. It's just, and so that's that, as you said, that in between state, like can't tell up from down, left from right, what's true, what's not true, who can I trust? I can't even trust myself.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because I don't even know what's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is a full-blown
identity
system.
crisis.
Yes. That's probably how most people would understand it.
I think that's
right?
the language, that we would hear and see. Yeah.
And of course, all these terms are just ways to conceptualize this thing that's happening to me. But I like the idea of like kind of looking deep and like instead of saying I'm in an identity crisis and to kind of look at what's actually happening. Well, if the world is not making sense anymore, it means the rules that are governing the rules that were there to govern how you maneuvered through the world, they don't work. You don't trust them anymore,
or they've expired or whatever.
Yeah. And
changing.
So that often will lead people here.
Yes.
So when we're going through these things, we're talking about, number one, what are the governing rules? Two, the collapse of the system, or when the rules fail. The changing of the rules, that's usually when people get to us.
Right, I agree. Yeah, sure. And that's
at least
the question.
For our unique flavor of therapy that we do.
Right. And I think that it's an overwhelming thing to think I get to write new rules, right? When that shouldn't have been this way, right? It wasn't supposed to be like this. I hear a lot of people say, I did everything right. Can't believe I'm in this spot. Right. And then we try to help people say, well, what are we gonna do now? What rules, what expectations, what identity, whatever insert your language, right, is going to work for where you are and who you are now.
Yeah. How do I know? If I'm supposed to write my rules, like, well, how do I know that that's right? And what I say is like, you gotta just do it. You gotta just start, and you gotta think that you're dealing with a pencil and not a pen. You got an eraser, or even if it is a pen, you can cross it out.
Yeah. It doesn't have to look
you draw
perfect,
a line,
right?
as long as it's a single line and you initial by it.
That's right. That's a healthcare joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the hard part is that basically when you've had this full blown system collapse and the rules don't make sense, there's basically three things I think that you're kind of analyzing, and it's a bit of a process. Like I'm not saying that it's 10 years or 5. It could be a few years in the making to kind of really flesh it all out. But I don't think it's years of misery. Usually the beginning is the hardest. But you are looking at some time spending to let your mind go through these experiences of determining one of three things. Do I want this to be part of my world? So there's this rule, whatever it may be, like let's use the example of kids are to be seen, not heard.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's not going to work for me anymore. Like that, I don't, why shouldn't kids be seen or heard, you know? So the first thing I'm doing is asking the question of why not?
Right.
You know, is there a good reason for that? And do I want it as part of my world? And so if I answer no, I'm just give it the axe,
Okay.
you know, like I'm not going to do that. So that's one thing that can happen. But if I answer yes, then I have to ask myself, do I want it to be part of my world as it is?
Mm-hmm.
So either you're going to kind of go through these rules, and by the way, this isn't, some of these in therapy you're speaking them out loud and you're kind of going through this process. But a lot of this is just kind of happening to you as you start getting a rhythm down in the new way that you're doing life. And so you're either going to give it the axe, so the rule is not going to make the cut, or the rule is going to make the cut. So let's use a different one. Like, why should men open the door for women? You know, why should we do that? Why do we have to? Why is that gentlemanly? Why do I have to take my hat off for a prayer, or why do I have to take my hat off for the national anthem? Why does this have to be a thing? Why must I do this?
Right.
And I might decide after I analyze it and I ask the question, I think this is a good thing. I think I'll continue to take my hat off during the national anthem. But let's say like opening the door, for example, like on that one, I might say like, I do think it's a good thing, but not exactly how it is. Sometimes I might go ahead and let somebody open the door for me. Or sometimes I might just open the door for myself and be completely okay with it.
Okay.
You know, but maybe not. It all depends on what's going to work for you in your new way of doing life.
Yeah, but you can hear that's a deep analysis, right?
Yeah.
Asking people, why do you do the things that you do?
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing. It's like having a 5-year-old around you all the time. But why? But why? But why?
No,
but
you're
why?
100% right on that. Like, isn't that why we get annoyed with them?
Yeah.
Because they're actually asking good questions.
They're asking great questions, and sometimes your answer is just because, and that's not going to fly with a 5-year-old who's trying to construct the world.
What we should do, you should just look at your kid and say, listen, I don't want to think that deep on it.
That would be a much more honest answer.
Yeah. I mean, they're sponges, right? They want to know. Like, they're building their own rule. They're
making
putting it together.
Yeah, sure.
And so when you say that, look, I don't want to think that deeply. They're going, we're not
sometimes
supposed to think
right,
that.
don't want to think very deeply.
Thinking deep, not going to make the cut. Not okay, right? And so it's kind of weird to kind of think of it like that. Like, okay, so you mentioned, the why questions with kids. As far as I know, I have never said to my kids, because I said so. You know,
I want to interview them, but okay, go on.
I don't think I have.
Okay.
Because I felt like they deserve a better answer than that. And if you remember from grad school, my original area of interest was parenting and stuff. So I have read tons of stuff, and I probably read that somewhere. They deserve a better answer, and I agree.
Yeah, I think so.
But boy, it's hard.
Well, sure, and I think that the idea, though, that sometimes is a tempting answer is because you haven't explored it yourself,
Sure.
right? And so.
Well, so I think this came up not too long ago with my 14-year-old. Why, Dad? Why? And he's got a good argument every time, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
And so I just told him, hey, dude, I really don't want to tell you. I said, I actually have a reason, but I don't think you'll hear it. I don't think you're going to understand it. I'll tell you it, but you're not. You are convinced of your argument. So, I think that's one reason why sometimes we just say because I said so. And so I've kind of got. I mean, sometimes it's just. At times I've said, it's just because that's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And The reality is I'm in charge.
Yeah.
One day you get to rule the roost
Yep.
and do what you want.
Your
And
own roost.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, but I really don't think I've ever done that.
Okay.
I think I would. I know I've been tempted to. That's for sure. I think that's why I know I have it, because I definitely have been tempted.
Because you've tasted the desire to
Right.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah, but think about like the what happens to them when you say something like, because I said so. Oh, don't question authority. That's
Yeah.
a rule.
Right.
Don't ever question authority. Okay, check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, sure.
How many people we worked with where you dive into their rule systems from growing up, and you can see the influence of secret keeping. Like,
Yeah.
don't talk, don't speak, don't express.
Don't ask the questions.
Keep your stuff to yourself. The grown-ups can't handle it if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Does it ever make you wonder though, like what kind of maladaptive rules our own children
Oh,
are
sure, all the time.
walking away with, because they grow, it's going to happen.
Oh, well, I know I've said
Well,
because I said so.
For some people, not.
I know I've said because I said so after I've already given the answer, and they keep asking, and the reason they're asking is because they just don't like my answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The better argument thing that you just said. They want me to change my answer.
Yeah.
So then it's because I said. Mm-hmm.
I'm having a thought where thinking back to a Jim Gaffigan bit where he's talking about eating at McDonald's, and he's like, it's like you walk in and see somebody and they're like, oh, or no, it says you're like, you let the cat out of the bag. You let somebody know that you eat at McDonald's, and they get this look on their face like, I didn't know I was better than you. That's the thought I had when you said, I have said that to my kids. It's like, oh, I didn't know I was better than you.
You
Carrie.
are better than me, Josh.
I'm not.
I'll let you have
that
it.
might be the one thing.
Okay.
But you're
We'll keep
okay
a
with
tally.
saying it, so that's the key.
That's right. So I'm not messing them up is what you're trying to lie to me about.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Can we talk about guilt? Let's see, we talk about that one.
I know. Well, that promotes a lot of the shooting, right? It's guilt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, to kind of bring this full circle back to the title is like, stop shooting all over yourself and others. I mean, we don't like that person in our life that is always telling you what you should do. You know what you should do.
Right.
Or, this is not the way it's supposed to be. As if their way is the one and only way.
Right.
But don't do that to yourself either. Like, don't be that your own annoying person in your life, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But what that means though is I gotta take this journey of writing and rewriting the rules, which brings us into the fourth point, which is there's a lot of polishing. You have to take the chance and step into it and start writing, and then you write and you erase and you polish. You polish it. And I don't think we ever get to a point where we're like, I arrived.
Yeah. No, I don't either. But I think I think when people especially start, therapy, they're feeling some kind of discomfort around the rules have failed, what went wrong, and
But they're feeling like a failure.
they're feeling like a failure. They're trying to cling on to rules that they need to let go of, whatever. And so the idea that you're going to write new ones and then that those may need to change, it's like, oh boy, it's kind of like starting to climb a mountain and be like, but there's another mountain right behind this mountain.
Sure. And what losses potentially are going to happen when I change these rules?
Absolutely. And grief is woven through all of this, of course, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's the kind of the emotional experience. But I think too, just to remember that, I like to think a lot about one thing you can always count on is that everything changes. And so the idea that you're going to create rules that work for you now and they're going to need to change don't mean the rules were crummy. Yeah. It just means that they always have to change, right? That's how I felt about when my kids were tiny. Like just when I think I got that stage figured out, dadgummit, they shift, right? They grow.
Yeah.
And so, but that's the way it is.
That's just the way it is. Sorry.
Singing squirrel moment.
I probably sing that so well that they might pick up on the copyright issue, so I better be careful.
Yeah.
Who sang that?
No, now dead air, Josh.
It's true.
Okay, yeah.
You don't know either?
I can't off the top of my head now. I'm trying to
Hannah,
fill the
who's saying it?
space.
Who's
I'm
saying
trying to think of
that's
too many
just the
things.
way it is?
All right.
Okay.
Put it in the show notes,
Yeah,
Josh.
we'll figure it out. Let us know, people. Hannah's like, I can't. I probably would know if you'd sing it in tune. So yeah, let's dive in. Let's go ahead and wrap up with some of these books.
Oh, yes.
And so, again, this governing rule thing is, you and I have had lots of conversations about this. So
Yes.
I'm sure it'll probably show up in various ways in other episodes. In fact, I think we have mentioned rule collapse in previous episodes we've done.
Yeah.
But there are some books that, reflect the rule failure or system collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the mecca of these books is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Absolutely. 100%.
How long has it been since you read that one?
Actually, it's only been, maybe 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Have you read it multiple times or just
twice?
Twice.
I read it
Okay.
twice.
Yeah. Me too. I actually read it once. I did I actually did a Man's Search for Meaning group with teenagers when I was working as a adolescent counselor many years ago.
I think the book is such, like you're saying, kind of the mecca, because the drastic nature of the rules changing just grips you, and it being autobiographical, right? So the idea that the author, Viktor Frankl, experienced the Holocaust and the things that were his life were so starkly and suddenly different that you just have to be a human going on that journey with him, right?
Yeah.
And then he has the second part, right, that's more, it's for everybody, but for clinicians, right, kind of the theory of, what does this mean and how do you use this?
Yeah, exactly. Like, how his whole view of life, his whole approach to doing therapy, because he was a therapist, it changed. And the first half of the book is the story of how, and then he kind of goes into his theory after that in the second half. But it's I think it was, don't quote me on this, but Harold Kushner that wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember. If that's the author, but
or Kusher. I can't remember his last name.
Yeah.
But I think he was quoted as saying, like, it's like one of the or the greatest book written in the 20th century. So, but fantastic book. But another one that I would say, like, that is really up there in terms of it's just a story. It's called A Monster Calls, and this was actually recommended to me by a client, and I read it, and man, it is deep. It is, brace yourself when you read this. It is about a 16-year-old boy whose mom is dying of cancer, and basically, to kind of give you the nuts and bolts, and I won't give it away, but that a monster shows up at his window and tells him, I'm going to tell you 3 tells, and after the 3rd tell, you're going to tell me a tell. And that's all I'm going to give you guys.
Ooh,
what are the
cliffhanger.
tells? And what you'll see is, like, when the monster tells his tells, they kind of look like the problem of the scenario and the solution to the problem look pretty simplistic, but they're not.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the climax of the book is when the boy tells his tell. And so very, very is one of my favorites. Hurting with God, if you're okay with a religious book, this one's actually written by an old professor of mine, and he is an Old Testament professor and has special interest in the Psalms. But this is actually the book we get the liminal space quote from. I don't know, Carrie, if you remember that, but Glenn Pemberton, he talks about liminal spaces in this book because it's a book about grief and loss and life changing, and the things and he's a testament to that because he has had a number of things happen to him, relationally, physically, his health. Back when he was a professor at the college I went to, he's not there anymore. He has his house burned down. How many people do you know whose house is caught on fire and burned down? You know, just the things that aren't supposed to happen have happened to him. You know. And then the last one being yours and Hannah's favorite / favorite to tease me about is the Will Smith book. I don't get is it because of the slap heard around the world?
No, I think I teased you about it before that.
Did you? Hannah, what's your deal with it? I see this is when you need a mic over there so you can weigh in.
Yeah, it is funny.
I think you guys just like to give me a hard time. And you guys have read it cover to cover, right?
No, you're right. I haven't read it.
Oh, okay.
And I mostly haven't read it just because you want me to read it.
I think you haven't read it because you want it to be what you want it to be in your mind so that you can tease me about it.
I think you went way too far with your analysis there. It's more simple. You want me to, so I won't.
Well, I is one of my. You guys know this, and this is. I set myself up for this.
You did.
I knew this would happen.
Yeah.
I knew they'd tease me about it, but I had to put it in there because I love this book. It is a book about rule failure, you know, and him coming to terms with that and trying to, you know, create the rules for his life that work. Obviously, that. Not so easy. I mean, we saw the slap heard from around the world. I mean, wasn't that? It's not like it's a perfect that you get it. That there's a way to figure it out without any kind of fallacy. So
sure, I know. You could have put Yuval Harari's.
I thought about putting
*Sapiens*.
that.
Yeah.
I thought
at least the second
go ahead,
half
let's
of
just
it.
mention it. Yuval *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari.
Yeah, that one is about. It's a book of the history. I mean, it's called like A Brief History of All Humankind or something like that is the subtitle. But it really is like the history of the species of humans. But it really does an amazing job at historically reflecting on how the rules of systems of cultures start, and it kind of really points out the absurdity.
Yeah.
Of rules and in large cultures especially. Like, why is this line Mexico and this line the United States?
Right.
This 1 foot here, 1 foot there, because we've decided that is, right? So it's a beautiful deconstruction while at the same time an education around what are rules, and that really they only exist because we all agree to play along.
Yeah. I will. You want to know why I didn't put that one in there?
Why?
Because for me, it is the single most impactful book in terms of it helping me deconstruct my own rule system.
I agree. I think we read it almost at the same time, and we had a book club every day going, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like I had to pace myself with it. It was too hard.
I had to too. I'd have to sit it down and just soak it in.
Because it was challenging my worldview. But at that time in my life too, my worldview was already being challenged to some degree. And so it was like, I really had to.
Double.
Yeah, I had to. And so I guess that's probably why I was like,
Well, it's also a huge text and very intimidating to pick up.
Yeah.
So, just forewarning anybody who decides.
Yeah,
to
but
check
I
it out.
will say it is. It's one of my favorite books.
Yeah, mine too. Of ever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. Well, I think we laid it out there.
We did it. Okay.
Yeah. So
Check.
another one. We saved the world. How many times are we going to save the world?
I guess every week.
It just keeps getting messed up. We fix it, and then it gets messed up like on Saturday.
I know. It's like having a puppy, right? I fix it and then he ruins it.
What's the deal? Okay. Well, we appreciate everybody who has tuned in. Please, again, give us that was the thing that I left out.
There it is.
Just giving us that 5-star review on the Apple Podcast.
I left that out. Yeah.
But thanks for listening and supporting us, and we will not be doing this over spring break, which is the next week. If you're listening to this on the podcast, it's probably dropping on spring break. So we're going to skip a week.
Yep, and then we'll be back.
Yep. Thanks.